Welcome to this webinar. Can everybody hear me well? Can you please make a note in the chat box or vote if you could hear us? Yes, that's great. Okay, welcome to this webinar. We have a couple of people in this online room and we have a couple of people on the phone. So we are using both technologies and see what works best. So we have Darlene on the phone from Nunatukawood and Michelle Wood from Nunatsiavut as well, and Carolyn Stutz from Medical University. And the others are in the room in the participant list. So welcome all. We have a very mixed group of researchers, community leaders, health professionals, and we would like to share during this webinar a bit of information about what we're doing and how you could apply for our funding opportunity and education opportunities. Before we start, I would just briefly introduce how you can participate during this webinar. So for the people that are online, you see a screen with on the left the participants, a chat box and a button talk. If you would like to ask a question or share a comment with us, then please raise your hand. There is a button raise your hand in the participant box. And then I will ask you to share your question. You could do this by putting on the talk button and then share your question if you are using a microphone. If you don't have a microphone, then please just share your question in the chat box. One thing that is very important, if you finish talking, please put the talk button off. Otherwise, we will experience some echoes in the audio system. Those are the most important features. We just see how it goes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt any time. We are with a small group, so there's lots of opportunities to ask questions during this webinar. I will hand it over to Catherine Street, which is our director, and she will start with the webinar.
Hello everybody, my name is Catherine Street. I'm the Director of the Newfoundland Support Unit. Thank you for joining this webinar. First of all, what I'd like to say is that I had hoped to give this webinar during a workshop at the Labrador Research Forum, but as I'm sure as many of you are aware, unfortunately Mother Nature conspired against us and the Labrador Research Forum got cancelled. So we decided to go for the next best thing and hold a webinar and invite as many people as we could possibly get to attend. So one thing I did want to point out is that, as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from Newfoundland, I'm actually from the UK, and I'm a little ashamed to say that my knowledge of the culture and traditions of Labrador and our other Indigenous communities is not as good as it should be. However, my background is actually from a very mixed area of the UK. I was born in Birmingham and worked in Nottingham as a healthcare provider in pharmacy and also as a policy person in social services. So during my time working in the UK, I became very aware of the need to respect people's culture and traditions when working with people from different communities. So I would like to request that you help me with something, and that is if I say something that is inappropriate or offensive to our Indigenous communities, please tell me. It is the only way I'm going to learn. And the first thing I'm really not even sure about, because I've had conflicting advice from CIHR and the Aboriginal office here, is how to refer to our communities. Should it be the Indigenous communities or Aboriginal communities? So if it's okay by everybody, I'm going to continue with the Indigenous communities as my way of referring. So just to quickly go through what the agenda is for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the joint working that the Newfoundland Support Unit has done with our Indigenous partners. I'm going to talk about the Canadian Institute of Health Research's strategy for patient-oriented research, then focus on what's happening in Newfoundland. And the bit I'm sure that you're most interested in hearing about is the Indigenous Communities Grant that we have available. I'm then going to hand the presentation back to Eva, who will talk about the education opportunities that we also have available. So joint working. I feel as if I'm starting this presentation with all apologies. So here goes another one. I, as the Director of Newfoundland Support, am aware that our joint working with our partners within our Indigenous communities is not as strong as it could have been, or it could be. I do have to thank Gail Turner, who is a resident of Happy Valley Goose Bay, who has helped the team with this considerably since October 2014, where she kindly volunteered to be part of the steering committee for Newfoundland Support. She's also the chair of the Patient Advisory Council. So she has been making sure that we pay attention to and focus on Indigenous communities. In an attempt to increase that and increase our working relationships, we've also started consulting with other colleagues. And as you always do when you're unsure of something, you tend to start with people you know. So I met with Catherine Chubbs from Eastern Health for her advice. We then, Eva, myself and another colleague, met with the Aboriginal Affairs Office at Memorial. Eva and Brendan Barrett, our clinical director, then had calls with representatives of governments and bands and communities within the Indigenous communities to ask how we could go about joint working, and specifically for thoughts on the Indigenous Communities Grant that we are launching, or have launched, sorry. And Brendan had this lovely quote that when he was talking to one of the individuals, they actually said, "I'm very glad I came to work today." That's actually one of the best compliments anybody can have. We then have had discussions with Labrador Grenfell Health and the Labrador Institute, and with Carolyn Sturge-Sparks, who is on the phone today. And it was through our links with the Labrador Institute that I think we managed to get our invite to the research forum. So, a little bit about research. How long does it take to get evidence into practice? I'm actually going to read a quote, because I like to get this one right, because it always shocks me when I read it. In March of 2001, the Institute of Medicine report, Crossing the Quality Chasm, stated, "It now takes an average of 17 years for new knowledge generated by randomized controlled trials to be incorporated into practice, and even then application is highly uneven." Recently, the National Institute of Health Strategic Plan estimated that moving a new drug or medical device from conception to market takes 14 years and costs about $2 billion. This includes 6.5 years for laboratory-based drug discovery and preclinical testing, 6 years for clinical testing of promising drug candidates, and 1.5 years for US Food and Drug Administration approval of those that are brought to market. So I think that tells us that nobody should underestimate how difficult research is and how long it takes to make an impact. And even when we do our research and bring services into practice, we still find that 50% of patients don't get treatment of proven effectiveness, and 25% get care that's not even needed or potentially harmful. And as I said, it takes an average of 17 years to turn 14% of original research findings to benefit of patients. We also then need to think about the impact and the need to integrate cultural and traditional beliefs when it comes to healthcare and health provision, and how the beliefs of Indigenous individuals, families and communities can work with health research to ensure that their beliefs are taken into full account. So the strategy for patient-oriented research that was launched by the Canadian Institute of Health Research is really trying to address this time lag between research making an impact at patient level, be that changes in practice at healthcare delivery or policy level. And the one way they have suggested for doing that is to bring into play patient-oriented research, POR. So this is about involving patients in research, the idea being that by doing so, the research is more relevant and therefore, hopefully, more appropriate and easier to implement the findings. Now, I'm talking about patient-oriented research. Now, patient can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. The CIHR definition of patient is really, in my opinion, anybody. It's anyone with an experience of a health issue, informal carers, including families and friends, but also anyone who may expect to experience the healthcare system at some point. Now, I would say that that is virtually anybody. You're very lucky in your life if you never have to go through a healthcare system. So please, when I refer to patient, if you don't see that as somebody you relate to or a phrase that you would like to use, please feel free to insert or substitute it for another phrase that means more to you. I mean, ones that other people use is citizen, consumer, resident, person. So please use whichever phrase is best for you. So we're talking about patient-oriented research. CIHR's definition of that is research that focuses on patient-identified priorities. So patients are involved in determining what the research should address. It engages patients as partners, so they are there on the research team. They are able to shape the research, shape the analysis, shape the delivery, how the results are delivered. And it improves patient outcomes. It's putting patients first. So it's improving the outcomes for patients when they receive healthcare by changes in healthcare practice or healthcare policy. And actually, although patient-oriented research is being talked about as the new buzzword, the new thing to do, if we actually look at the TriCounty Policy statement from the Research Ethics Board, when it was talking about involving or working with Aboriginal communities, a number of the points within the statement very much reflect what the CIHR defines as patient-oriented research. So number one, relevance to community needs and priorities, beneficial to participating communities, recognition of the role of elders, so people with experience within the community using that experience to shape the research, appropriate engagement with community representatives in analysis and dissemination. So from those 8 points there, we've got, I think it's 4 or 5 that actually also relate to patient-oriented research. Now, any of you who've been involved in research before will know that for years and years we have engaged patients, but it's been patients as partners. This is different. This is about patients working with us. So we're not talking about a patient who volunteers to try a different drug or volunteers to have their dialysis done 2 months earlier than would normally be recommended in policy. It's about patients who work on the research team and help us identify priorities for research. So it's meaningful and active collaboration in governance. That's why we have people like Gail Turner on the steering committee, and we also have a patient advisory council. Priority setting, undertaking the research, and what the CIHR call knowledge translation, which is really telling people the findings of the research. This culture of patient-oriented research is being carried out internationally, and within the UK there's an organisation called Involve, and their quote about engaging patients as partners is about research being carried out with or by members of the public rather than to, about, or for them. So as I said, the Canadian Institute of Health Research developed a new initiative called the Strategy of Patient-Oriented Research. And I always smile when I think about this because I think it was designed to confuse at times, because under the Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research, there are a number of other initiatives. Now the one that is of greatest focus to me is support units. Within each jurisdiction across the country, and jurisdictions are generally a territory or a province, apart from in the Maritimes where the 3 provinces have come together to form a maritime support unit. Within each jurisdiction, a support unit is formed, and these are local research support infrastructures that help to facilitate research. So by providing people, equipment and services, but also equally importantly, they're also responsible for changing the culture, for making people see patient-oriented research as the way forward and to understand the advantages of it. And also for training new people, new researchers who are coming through the system to take forward patient-oriented research. So in addition to the support networks, there's also the national SPORE networks, so Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research networks. And these are described as disease-focused research networks. But actually the first one that's set up isn't disease-focused, it's about primary care. And I believe we got Nicole Porter from the Newfoundland and Labrador Prime, which is our local primary and integrated healthcare network. I believe she's on the line, so if anyone has any questions about that later, I'm sure Nicole will help us out. But Prime is responsible for working with other primary integrated healthcare networks across the country in developing primary healthcare services. We also have a mental health network that is called Access MH, and it has a focus on youth and young adult mental health across the country. And we have 5 chronic disease networks. I always forget one of these, so I'm going to refer to my notes. The chronic disease networks, which are national in focus, look at diabetes, kidney disease, chronic kidney disease, learning disabilities. It's called Child Bright. It's around traumatic or head injuries for children, chronic pain network, and also one on gastrointestinal disease. So these are national networks. The one here is the one on chronic kidney disease actually has a focus here in Newfoundland because Brendan Barrett, who is our scientific director, is also one of the principal investigators on the chronic kidney disease network. So NL Support, which is the one that Brendan and I are responsible for, we came into being, well, our funding started in February 2014, but we weren't launched until November 2014. And we are funded by the Canadian Institute for Health Research, the Newfoundland government, and IBM. It may seem strange to people that IBM are included, but I will explain why later. And we actually come under a broader umbrella called the Translation and Personalised Medicine Initiative, which includes within it a collaboration with IBM, Memorial University, the provincial government, so Department of Health and Community Services. I've still got BTCRD up there, but it's actually Tourism, Culture, Innovation and Industry now. It's a new department's name. And the Research Development Corporation. The Newfoundland and Labrador Centre for Health Information, that is responsible for managing health information within the province. The federal government, through the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency and CIHR, and other jurisdictional agencies with a stake in patient-oriented research. And that last one really brings in virtually everybody. So that's regional health authorities, that's governments, that's bands, that's communities, and it's university groups such as the Newfoundland and Labrador Centre for Applied Health Research. And we're very lucky in that we are located within the new Craig L. Dobbin Research Centre. So each support unit is built on the same core functions. The first one, and the reason why IBM are involved, if we go from, say, 12 o'clock on the circle at the top and then go clockwise, the first one is data platforms and services. The data platforms and services core is responsible for ensuring that we have access to and are able to analyze data to facilitate health research. So with this core and the next one, method support and development, where IBM come in. IBM assists us by providing a significant amount of money for analytical tools and also half of a very large compute, actually one of the largest computers within Atlantic Canada. They assist us in that way, allowing us to analyze data. They also assist us on the method support and development core in terms of looking for different ways of carrying out research and methods. Next one round is health systems, KT and implementation. So this is all about bringing about true change. So we've got the data, we've done the analysis. Now how do we bring about the change within the system? How do we tell people about the research? There's then real-world clinical trials. So moving away from that idea that trials are done with a very defined little group who only meet certain criteria, but actually doing clinical trials within the real world. We then move to career development in methods and health services research. And this is where we look to support current staff within the health service and the university in advancing their career, and EBA is responsible for providing a lot of trainings to these people. But we also provide funding to students to allow them to advance their education in the areas of patient-oriented research. And finally, we have consultation and research services. So this is where the support unit can assist researchers in developing funding applications, in taking forward research, in sorting out budgets, and how to engage people. And then finally, central to it all is patient engagement, ensuring that patients are engaged in each of those cores and central to the work that we are doing. So how does Newfoundland support work? How do you get help from us, assistance from us? Well, there's very simple requirements. Your research must be patient-oriented. The research must include a focus on either Newfoundland or Labrador, or both. and the research should address priorities that matter to communities. And that's really where the Indigenous Communities Grant is so important. I will point out though, if you just need a little bit of advice from us on something, it's not essential that your research addresses a specific priority identified by your community. If it is patient-oriented research and you really just need a couple of hours from us, we will provide that support. So, as well as the cause, we have also set up some fun. Well, actually, before I go any further, are there any questions? I noticed that we have a comment from Michelle that you use Indigenous community. Thank you for that. And Nicole has acknowledged that she's here. Thank you, Nicole. Any questions on the phone? I'm going to take silence that no questions.
No, no questions at present. This is Carolyn.
Thank you.
No, none from me either.
Okay, if there are no questions, I'll carry on. Okay, Nathaniel, you've got a question. Is this call for one grant? I'm going to go on to that now. We have a number of funding calls out, and hence why there may be some confusion regarding what's available. So the first one is a patient-oriented research grant, which is open to anybody within the province, or was open to anybody within the province. The grant for 2016-2017, the expressions of interest, were received in the end of October 2016, so the call is now closed. You can't put an application in without putting an expression of interest in. And that was for, we have $300,000 available, so that was for 4 grants of up to $75,000. If Newfoundland Supports funding is continued at a national level, we will launch this funding call again next year. We also have a health professional grant. This is a $10,000 grant, and it came as a recommendation from the external evaluation that was done of Newfoundland Support. The evaluation recommended that we did some small grants which would allow researchers and healthcare professionals to get their research started. So we launched this in January 2017. So there are 3 grants available at $10,000 up to the end of March of this year. You can apply for less, but you can't apply for more. And then next year, there will be 5 grants available from the 1st of April to the 30th of September, and a further 5 grants available from the 1st of October to the 31st of March 2018. And you can apply for these at any time. The grants are available until they run out. We also have, as I mentioned, education funding for Masters and PhD students. We have a call out at the moment that closes on April the 14th. And for Masters, this is for up to $14,000 for 2 years, and for PhDs, up to $18,000 for 3 years. And finally, the patient-oriented research grant. This is specifically for Indigenous communities. So that is the communities of Labrador, Con River, and any communities that don't have land rights, which, if my information is correct, is the Halipu and the Métis. So there is a total funding pot of $75,000. The call was launched in February 2017. Now we could accept 1 grant of $75,000 or a number of grants of a total of up to $75,000. So we've referred to this as the Indigenous Communities Fund, and it has been developed in partnerships with communities. So Eva and Brendan kindly made a number of phone calls to the communities, and the communities kindly assisted us in developing the criteria for the funding call. And it is specifically focused at improving the health and/or well-being of the Indigenous people of Canada. It is a total of $75,000 with a 1-year duration. But as I said, that could be 1 grant of 75, 1 of 30, and 1 of 45, but the total funding envelope is $75,000. Expressions of interest for this grant are due on the 7th of April, and the applications need to be in by the 31st of July. Now, the objectives of this funding call is to address the priorities of the people in Indigenous communities. And I must emphasize here that the priorities must be determined by the communities submitting the grant, and not imposed on the communities by out-of-community administrators. So it's really up to communities to identify those priorities. Now, I understand from discussions that Eva and Brendan have had that a number of the communities already know what their priorities are for healthcare. However, if other communities feel they may need some assistance in determining those priorities, then please let us know and we will do whatever we can to assist, but the process must be led by the communities. The proposed applications must also have the potential to improve the health of individuals living within those communities, and also must allow us to allow the possibility to build and sustain a full range of applied health research. Carrying on with the objectives, the call is designed to enhance the role of patients and community members by involving them in the full process of research, from identification of priorities to doing the research to implementation of findings, so ensuring that the communities are fully engaged. It's also hoping that by bringing in these smaller grants of up to $75,000, it will assist some of the communities and researchers to actually establish their research program, to allow them to take forward a proof of concept to enable them to apply for more external funding for larger amounts of money to bring into the province. And we're also hoping that with it being led by the communities, it will help to encourage partnerships with researchers and decision makers. Now, certainly from starting this process, the Newfoundland support team have developed partnerships that we hadn't before with people like Ashley Consolo and others from the Labrador Research Institute and Labrador and Grenfell Health. Now, the expression of interest, as I say, the expression of interest is due on the 7th of April, and it must outline the research being addressed by or with the community. So it's up to the community to determine what their top priority is and to submit an expression of interest in line with that top priority. It will need to include the research question and the hypothesis and why this is of relevance and importance to the community. It also needs to briefly outline what's already taken place in terms of community engagement and what's planned to happen in the future to ensure that the community are fully engaged. Now, with a lot of funding rounds, expressions of interest are used as a way of screening out applications. That is not the case here. The reason we have the expressions of interest coming in a long time before the grant is due is to allow us to work with the community to identify if anything is needed from us, if there's anything they're unclear of in relation to writing the application. We will not screen anything out, and we will be there to help if we are needed. So, who needs to be on the Indigenous Communities Fund application? We have 3 key points. You've got to include at least one member of the Indigenous community. They could be the principal applicant, the co-applicant, or the knowledge user, but they have to be one of the key leads. You must engage one individual with a personal experience of the health issue under study, again as either a co-applicant, team or advisory member, or knowledge user, and they will be involved at various stages within the research process because they know what it's like to have that condition, to live there. And you also need to include at least one independent researcher. This is to ensure that we have, that when the applications are reviewed, that there is clear scientific process for the research to be done. And they may be either the principal applicant or co-applicant. Now, when the applications come in, as I say, at the end of July, we've also talked to community partners about how the review process should go forward. And it's been very clear from the messages we've had from our partners in that representatives from each of the communities should be involved in the review panel, and we fully support that. Once we have identified who the review panel will be, the process will be discussed with the reviewers. And the most important issue that has to be agreed during those discussions is what happens if there is a reviewer who is in from the same community as an application. Will they be asked to be excluded from reviewing those applications, or will they be in on discussions? That is for the review panel to determine. So what we're hoping is that we're not imposing any processes, but that it will be an iterative process and we will develop the rules together. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that before I just quickly talk about the roles of the Newfoundland support team and before I hand over to Eva? Any questions on the phone?
No, none here, Carolyn.
Okay.
None here, Darlene.
I've got one from Nathaniel. To what extent will Newfoundland support consider proposals that address public health-oriented research? As I've emphasised, the focus is on patient-oriented research. So as long as your research is looking at true outcomes for patients, then yes, we would consider them. Am I thinking that you may be looking at the broader determinants of health, the social determinants of health, such as housing, education? As long as you can show how that will impact on health and healthcare delivery, then they would be considered. Any other questions?
Catherine, this is Carolyn here. I do have a question. Could the people being a part of, Indigenous people, a part of this research, could it be Indigenous people who live here in the urban centre? Is that a possibility?
Eva's just signalled to me to repeat the question. So what, I'm not sure if everyone online heard, what Carolyn, who's on the phone, has asked is whether or not when we say that we must have Indigenous communities involved, or people from Indigenous communities involved in the grant, could those people live within the urban centres rather than still live within the community? They could, but we would need confirmation that the community itself was supportive of the application that is being put in, and that they are supportive of the engagement of those people who are currently living outside of the community. I am aware that the links between people who have left their home community and the home community are still strong, but we would just need that confirmed.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm not used to doing webinars, so it's really difficult. You're looking between the chat box to the screen to the phone, and so if I look a bit confused, that's why. Okay, we'll have a chance for more questions at the end. So I just quickly want to tell you the team that we're working with. In terms of drafting the research applications, there's Dale Humphreys, who's a research officer with us, who has years of experience of working on reviewing applications for the university, so is very aware of what needs to be in an application. And he and I are available to assist with applications. For lay summaries, we have the Patient Advisory Council, who are available to advise on lay summaries. And this, I just need to emphasize, this isn't just this funding call, this is for any patient-oriented research applications you may put in, whatever the funding body. Budgets, and sadly my life seems to revolve around budgets at the moment, it's that time of year. So assistance with budgets I'm more than happy to do. Brendan Barrett, who is, as I said, our scientific clinical lead, is a wealth of information on methods for research and how to ensure that your research will be seen as appropriate, correct scientifically, etc. Knowledge translation, we have Amanda Hall, who has a resume as long as your arm, but she is excellent on knowledge translation and making sense of things, making them real in the real world, and making them understandable to people who don't live in academia. Patient engagement, of course, you've already met Eva. Well, patient engagement and training and capacity development, these are Eva's areas of expertise, and she's always happy to assist you with those areas of work should you need them. And I think on that note, I hand over to Eva to talk about training and education.
Thank you, Catherine. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to share them anytime in the chat box, and we come back to it later. I would just like to share a couple of opportunities that are out there. I would like to mention up front that you're not obligated to attend any of the sessions to apply for funding. So just see them as opportunities. They're free of charge, but you don't have to follow any training sessions to apply for funding. So what we are offering based on the needs assessment that we did earlier, like a year ago, about, like mainly I would say across Newfoundland and Labrador. There's a couple of responses we got from Labrador. But we're offering a monthly webinars and face-to-face sessions. So you can just join them like this session today. And we also offer sessions on request or one-on-one consultations, as Catherine mentioned. And I would like to mention that on a national level, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, in collaboration with patients, educators, and health professionals and decision makers, they developed a national curriculum about patient-oriented research. And this is really a foundational curriculum to give you a basic understanding what it's about and to create partnerships. So this is built on consensus, and the support units are piloting the curriculum at this moment. So we are piloting the curriculum in Newfoundland and Labrador. The goals of this curriculum is to give people the basic set of knowledge about health research and how they may wish to become involved in health research, to build partnerships, and in the end to carry out a research project together if they wish. So the target audience of these sessions, they basically targeted anybody with an interest. So the main focus would be patients and community leaders and researchers, but health professionals, decision makers, students, and anybody else with an interest is welcome to join. There are 3 modules that are developed. So the first module is Module 1 about patient-oriented research in general. So during this module, we will talk about a bit of the objectives of the strategy for patient-oriented research. Also, what is it like patient-oriented research, and how could patients and communities make a difference in health research? So how can they be involved? And having a mixed group together of community leaders and patients and others will create a very interesting discussion. That's what we heard back from our participants so far. And the second module is about fundamentals of health research. So this is mainly targeted at people who don't have any experience or any background in health research. So this will give you a basic understanding what is health research about, and anything else that you should know about doing health research. And then Module 3 is about building partnerships and consolidating teams. And this is more about team building. So how do you work together as a team consisting of patients and researchers and maybe others? So the modules are standalone, so they can be taken in any order, and people will receive a certificate after they complete the module. So we have piloted this, like the curriculum, once now in St. John's. We had a very successful sessions, I gotta say, like a very good mixed group of people, a lot of great discussions, and people who are moving forward with this as well. However, we are very aware of the fact that the curriculum has been designed on a national level, and we are not sure if the curriculum addresses the perspectives of Indigenous people and their education needs as well. And since this will be further developed on the national level, we think it could be important to pilot this as well in Labrador to get your perspectives on this curriculum. So you will be asked to be part of an evaluation process, so to fill out a survey and to share your experience with the National Institute of Health Research. So I have been in contact with a couple of communities just to see if there's an interest. As I said, it's no obligation. You can still apply for funding without attending any training session. But I just wanted to check if there is an interest in this pilot and which module maybe interests you the most, or if you are interested in all modules. So I don't know if anybody would like to comment on that, or maybe share or something in the chat box. I would like to open it up, actually. I know it's challenging on a webinar.
I watch on the side.
I see that a few people are typing, so we're just going to wait a second. Any questions on the phone or any thoughts on piloting this curriculum?
Eva, it's Carolyn here. I have a medical student, part of his independent project is going to be conducting research with Indigenous people affiliated with the St. John's Native Friendship Center. And this is from an issue that was raised by the people affiliated with the center. And so I would like to mention to him, because I can see from the get-go that Module 1 would be very much in keeping with the line of research, what's going to be conducted. And I'd certainly be interested in participating in at least Module 1, if not the other modules as well.
Okay, we got Caroline on the phone, and she is sharing her interest regarding to a student that might be interested in Module 1, and that's really related to the research. And yeah, that's definitely possible. Students are more than welcome. We are thinking about, there was one other question in the chat box, to really offering this in Labrador. So the only requirement would be that people come to Labrador. If people have difficulties to get to one location, which is always a challenge, then they could come to us and we could see what we can do regarding funding. So we have a bit of budget to get people together, because it's always challenging, of course, but there's just a limited amount as well. So we're thinking about a central location in Labrador, basically up to the communities. We're just looking for a host. And yeah, if there is a host available, then we could work out the details like dates and the modules, and then people can be invited and join us.
Okay, I understand. Well, maybe I can come and talk to you on my own, about this situation here. So.
Yeah, I can definitely meet with anybody if you want to have a chat about this. Michelle Wood is also sharing with us that she would like to have more information about what the pilots look like. I can definitely share the modules and even the slides, because that's actually what we want to learn. Is like, is the information, does it make sense from an Indigenous perspective? And I have to say that there were a couple of other provinces who piloted the modules, and they already have shared a couple of really good suggestions how the curriculum can be improved. So we can take that into account. We cannot totally change the curriculum as it is a national pilot, but we can certainly, for example, put in like more local examples, more traditions. We could work that out together. So I don't know, Michelle, what works best for you? Is it helpful just to have a separate chat about this?
Yeah, separate chat would be great, and I'll also put that in the chat box as well, so that people that are online that are using the telephone can see that.
Thank you, Michelle. So Michelle is mentioning that a separate chat would be great, and she also mentioned in the chat box that Happy Valley Goose Bay might be a central location where we could offer it and that people could fly in. Erica is mentioning that it sounds interesting and would also like to be interested in seeing the content. And then we have a comment from Russell. Russell is planning to have a third-year family medicine resident working and researching for 4 to 5 months between July 2017 and July 2018. So they will be housed at the Labrador Institute, and we hope to engage in patient-oriented research. Yeah, so also students and residents are more than welcome to join. So I guess it's just then figuring out what works best. I got the feeling that there is a kind of interest, and it's even fine if it's just a small group of people, like even 5 people or 10 people would be more than welcome. As it is a pilot, I'm not sure if the information really addresses all your needs, but your feedback would be very appreciated. And it's also an opportunity, I guess, to bring people together who are interested in patient-oriented research. So they will also be able to create partnerships.
So I hope people can hear me. I'll try and speak loud. I'm round the corner off the camera now. Even so, could we commit to sharing the slides with those who are interested? And then if people could come back to us and indicate if we organise an event in Happy Valley Goose Bay, if they would be interested in attending or asking some of their colleagues to attend.
Yeah, I could definitely share with all the people involved on this webinar just the content or just the basic information. The slides is a lot, but I would be happy to to share it and then get your opinions on, like, if you would be interested in piloting it. As I mentioned, like, we cannot change all the slides, but we can change the way we facilitate it. We can include traditions. We can include local examples. We can do our best to make it fit to your needs, and we don't have to pilot all the modules. So that's really up to you. I see that there is a kind of interest, and I think the most important thing is figure out the content first, which modules would be of interest of you, and then it was suggested that Happy Valley Goose Bay could be a location. So then I think the best approach would be to work with maybe Michelle, is that you or one of your colleagues, to figure out the date and location and who could best open the session, etc. I don't know, Michelle, would you be willing to do this based on, of course, first seeing the information?
Absolutely, I wouldn't mind being a part of it. And I think one of the things that you should definitely also think about when you're looking at who to engage to host would be the Labrador Institute, because through Memorial University, the Labrador Institute is the arm that works for all of the, the presentations and the opportunities for people to gather and learn for Labrador. So Labrador Institute and myself, for sure, I'd be happy to help.
So that's great, Michelle. Michelle just mentioned on the phone, as I'm not sure if everybody can hear us online, but she would be happy to help, and she mentioned as well Labrador Institute, and I think that's a great suggestion. We are already in contact with them. We were actually hoping to incorporate it in the form, but that didn't work out. But yeah, definitely, it would be so helpful if we have local people that can help us.
Oh, sorry, and just so that you know, the research forum has been rescheduled to the first week of May. So I don't know if that may influence some of the dates that you're looking at, but keep that in mind.
Yeah, so the research forum, the Labrador Research Forum, has been scheduled, like rescheduled for the first week of May. And yeah, I think it's just figuring out what timing works best. I don't know, Russell has mentioned also a conference. I don't know about June, May, what suits best. Are there people having at this point already on the webinar a preference or suggestion for the timing if we are going to pilot this in Labrador?
This is Darlene here. I'm open to the discussions of the dates, I guess, looking at, possibly later in the spring or if not even later than that. But also, I'm definitely interested in being involved and helping where I can with this, and interested in seeing the slide deck to see, if I have recommendations on doing one module or more modules, or how that would look. If we were to do all of the modules to pilot it, how long would that take?
Yeah, good point. So on the phone we got a comment from Darlene and a question. She's happy to work with us as well, so that's great. Thank you for that, Darlene. And she's asking what kind of time commitment we're looking at. So the total of the 3 modules will take 2.5 days in total. And we can divide that and split that up if you wish. So we could do morning sessions, evening sessions, even weekend sessions if you wish. And we could also say, okay, we're doing only maybe module 1 and module 3, and then it would be about, let's say, 1.5 or 2 days. So it's really up to you what works best. The only issue is a little bit like here in St. John's, we split it up and divided it over 2 months. However, if we're flying up to Labrador, I hope that you understand that we would like to do it within 1 week or so.
Yes, for sure. And I also echo what Michelle said in terms of the Labrador Institute and them engaged in possibly hosting and being involved as well.
Thank you, Darlene. And Michelle is proposing to get together by teleconference with those who are interested in looking at the module materials, and then what dates might work after this webinar is concluded. I think that's a great suggestion. So who would be willing to review the modules and get together for another teleconference or video conference to have a chat about this after you know, you had the opportunity, of course, to review them. So Michelle would be willing, Darlene, you would be willing to do this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Russell's, you would like to be kept in the loop, so maybe not with reviewing, but like setting maybe dates if we continue with this. Is that correct? Okay, we will keep you in the loop. I see that a couple of people are typing. Erika, you would like to be part of reviewing the materials? Great, thank you. We will share the materials with you. And suggestion to talk with Jennifer. Yeah, she is not joining this webinar. We invited her as well, but we could definitely have a chat with her and see if she would be interested in being involved in this.
I would be interested, Carolyn here, I would be very interested in reviewing the module.
Okay, so Carolyn would be interested as well, thank you. Anybody who is interested is welcome. So what we will do is we will first share the materials with you all and a doodle poll, I guess, to figure out what kind of date works best for a teleconference. And we will share with everybody who is on this webinar today just a brief description of all the modules. And then we will get back to you all when we reviewed the materials and when we made a decision if we're going to pilot the materials in Labrador and when, where, how, and all those practicalities. Well, that's really helpful, and I'm really, really glad to hear that you're willing to review the materials. I guess this was all about the education opportunities so far. There are lots of more opportunities to work together, but that's maybe something more to discuss during the Labrador Research Forum. So we talked today mainly about doing research and grants to do research and education opportunities. But as a support unit, we also are responsible for creating more awareness about community involvement and patient engagement and priority setting, building partnerships, translating research into practice and policy, sharing research findings. So there's a lot more on our agenda, and maybe you're also on yours. So during the Labrador Research Forum, we maybe could use this opportunity to talk together and see how we could work together for other items. Are there any further questions or comments? Also, comments are more than welcome. Was this webinar helpful? Yeah, it was helpful. Great. It's always a bit hard if you're on the webinar to see if it's helpful. So I'm glad to hear it was helpful. The webinar, we recorded the webinar as well. I hope that's okay with you. I haven't mentioned that at the start, but if you're not okay with me, let me know. But we were planning to share the webinar online so that people who missed the webinar can access the webinar. And you can also share the link with coworkers. You may also share the presentation with coworkers or with anybody within your network. Please feel free to share it. And last but not least, please apply for the grant. The deadline is April 7th, and we're looking forward to receive, to get a lot of interesting topics and proposals. It's a very short letter of intent, so it's just 500 words, I believe, that we are asking. We go from there, but if you haven't shared your letter of intent, then you cannot be part of the total funding competition. So April 7th is an important deadline.
We have a question also that we share the link.
So we will distribute the link from this webinar with you all as soon as it's online. It often takes a couple of days, and we will also share the link to the grant with you. and we will share the presentation. So feel free to share it all within your communities. If you need any assistance, for example, with priority setting, or how to write your letter of intent, or who to work with, or maybe finding community partners, or finding researchers, we can help you with that as well. So feel free to reach out, and we hope we can be of help. Okay. If you would like to have more information, I just put on our website and Twitter and Facebook. We are, every opportunity will be shared by Facebook and Twitter. So if you would like to get the latest news, it's best to follow us in that way. Any further questions on the phone or online? I hear thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for taking the time to attend this webinar, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and hope to see you soon in Labrador.
Okay.
Bye.